Hello and welcome back. We're just going back today. This is a pop-up session of the Can Diversity Collective's Inkwell Beach Can Live. You say, we talk about it being live and popping and how things can happen just when they happen. This is grown out of a comment in the chat, from Nicole. Was like, but what about Ghana? What about Africa? And we were like, you know what? We're pulling in Nicole, we're pulling in my brother Chidi, and we're going to have a conversation about it. So let me just explain to the world how I know these two beautiful people. We met in 2019 in Africa, in Morocco, at the beautiful Jnam Tamsa that's owned by Marianne Loom Martin in Morocco. And let me tell you, it was one of the best places and best experiences. We are part of the Rouse family. We have our Rouse Shimmy. Shout out to all of our Rouse family.
The only hotel in Morocco owned by a Black woman, which is very important. So
that is very important to know. And if you have not been and you need to make your journey to Africa, make that one of the first stops that you make. So we love, support everybody at the Jnam Tamsa. So we would meet at the clearing during the round session, and at the clearing we would have some amazing deeply rooted conversations that we could share everything about creativity, about love, about life, just about making magic happen. And so I wanted to at least have two of my favorite people from the session come. Chidi was in and out. He's one of the co-founders, I believe, so he was the only brother. He's our brother in the mix of like women. But we love him dearly because of his feminine side, but the masculine kept us all strong. So I want to introduce them, say their name, and then they're going to give you all of the magic that they make in the world. Nicole is my sister. I think I have a picture of us leaning on each other we were in the desert on our last night.
Okay.
I have to remember to pop that in so you can see it. So Nicole, tell us who you are.
Oh my God, the question, who am I? Oh my God. Okay. My name is Nicole. I am a TV producer and director and writer, a filmmaker. I got into the TV space when I created An African City, which was dubbed by CNN and BBC as Africa's answer to Sex and the City. And true enough, that was the inspiration. That was the inspiration.
So was that your first kind of foray into television? You created this?
Yes. I mean, I was on a completely different path. I was in international development. I was working at the World Bank in Washington, D.C., but one of the reasons I wanted to work at the World Bank was I felt like they were part of the problem. I felt like they were part of the reason why Africa has this bad, most people, when they think of Africa, or a lot of people, when they think of Africa, they just think about war, poverty, famine. And I felt like if I worked in the World Bank, I felt like I could change some things internally, and I could change some things that go out externally, such as press releases and just different communique. But that was taking too long. So luckily, with the power of the internet, I said there's another way to disrupt the single story of Africa, and that's by creating a web series featuring 5 beautiful Ghanaian, Nigerian, American girls, and fighting the single story that way. Okay,
so we're going to come back to you and talk more about that. Where are you calling in from right now? I think people.
Ghana. I'm in Ghana.
So, you're officially making this international. You've gotten us touching the continent, and that's important to me because this is the Can Diversity Collective. I started this as an answer to having more faces that look like ours at the Cannes Lions International Festival. Because out of the 15,000 people that were there, maybe 200 looked like us. The majority of the people that looked like us came from the US. There's some sprinklings from the UK, and not a lot from Africa. Not of the thought leadership, not a lot of the creativity and some of the creative work that's inspired, I know, from the continent was there. So I think this is, my first attempt. And when we go back next year, we're going to have a larger African contingent there. So shout out to Ghana. Shout out to you for calling in from Ghana. My brother, you are next. Give us an introduction of who you are, what you do, and Why are you here today?
Yeah. Hey, Adrienne, Nicole, these are two of my Rouse sisters. To any of my Rouse sisters online, it's good to see you as always. So I'm Chidi Afulezi. I like to call myself, first and foremost, I like to refer to myself as a teacher. And the reason I love referring to myself as a teacher is because I literally do teach. So I'm the head faculty for product innovation and entrepreneurship at Africa Leadership University School of Business, which is founded by a Ghanaian, right? One of the
my cousin. Hey, Fred.
You see, this is why I don't like talking about Fred, because he's connected to everybody, and then I can't get any time for myself.
Amarteifio. That's my cousin.
No. Okay, Fred, leave the conversation, right? But that's one of the things that I do. But the teaching piece is also about learning. And so, in my corporate career, I was a product management executive with CNN, Turner Broadcasting, Time Warner, Sony Music. And then I left that to become an entrepreneur because I really wanted to focus my lenses on Africa. And when I was at Turner, when I was at CNN, I mean, those companies really weren't pushing for Africa. All they wanted to do was just throw stuff over the wall into the continent. And so I pushed internally and said, look, send me to Africa, send me to my continent, and let's see what we can do there. You can't just replicate what you're doing in the States and then just plant it over there on the continent. And that didn't work out for me. In fact, it actually got me in trouble. So I left the company and decided to start my own thing, and ultimately ended up with our Rouse sister, the co-founder of Rouse, Zane Vergie. The two of us are building essentially a venture studio for Africa right now. And when we say venture studio, it's a company that is looking for businesses and products on the communications, media, and education side. And we kind of package them, and hopefully we can put them out there to do their own thing by themselves at some point in the future. So the two of us are working on that. We're very excited about that. And there's other things, of course. We're all multifaceted, right? But those are some of the things that we're doing right now.
So, right now it seems like, I think we are, at least in America, we've been going through ways of kind of making ourselves or trying to reconnect to the continent.
Yeah.
We went through phases of, I know in college, I had a kufi, I had kente cloth.
Absolutely.
I was like,
I remember.
You know what I mean? I was there. And so we, a lot of my house has African art. People find, Black people in particular, looking for ways to reconnect to the continent, to find some type of root and connection. And as of late, this was the 2020 or 2019 was the celebration of the year of return. And it was a big push to get people to come back to Africa, go to Ghana in particular to learn more. What did that mean to, you guys? What was that, coming from having that true connection that you can identify to Africa? What did that mean to you to see the new interest, if you will?
Yeah.
Or is it new?
Well, it's evolving. That's the way I see it, right? The challenge, look, Africa has always had a branding challenge, and I think Nicole has talked about this, and this is probably part of her MO today, is Africa's always had a branding problem. And you would think that branding problem just applies to kind of the media, what the media has portrayed in terms of what the continent looks like. The other piece is that duality, the tension between the African American community and African community has always been there. And those portrayals have actually really, really kind of been absorbed by our brothers and sisters here in the States. And so what that has done is it posed some challenges. And so what the country of Ghana has done, look, let me tell you, Nigerians and Ghanaians, we're cousins, right? And we always fight like cousins. I give the Ghanaians a lot of props for what they did, because the way they positioned the year of return and Ghana in general is, listen, come back home, right? It wasn't, your life is necessarily going to be better or worse. Just come back home. You're going to be welcomed here. This is where you will feel like family. We will treat you like family because you are family.
And that falls in line with our history. That falls in line with history in terms of Martin Luther King, what inspired some of the work that he did, what he was in Ghana in 1957. He was in Ghana. Martin Luther King was in Ghana in 1957, and he saw our country get independence. And that inspired him. So when he went back to the United States of America, he knew that there needed to be a freedom for African Americans. You know, so there's always been this really beautiful, intimate partnership between the two, between Africa and African Americans. It just goes back to that moment.
So you guys,
no, go ahead. No, just to conclude, it was a very brilliant campaign, right? And I call it campaign because this stuff there's actually a science and an art to it. And so as a campaign, they did a really good job. I think that it brought a good amount of people back home. But my concern about that was, okay, Ghana has done this and they've done a really good job about it, but there's a vast portion of Africa, right, that still is seen in certain ways. Ghana has done a good job of opening a lot of eyes and doors to what is possible. My concern is that other countries and other areas don't follow the same template, or at least follow the same strategy to say, listen, come back home, right? Because in my travels across the continent, I do a lot of continental travel, I don't see enough of our brothers and sisters from the continent. I just don't, not as much as I see. And I mean in terms of people coming in and immersing, right? As opposed to just doing the Instagram, get a nice pose on the camera and then you kind of say, I've been to this country. I don't see enough of that. And I wish and hope that other countries are encouraging folks to come back and really immerse in the culture.
Yeah. One thing you both mentioned, you talked about the branding of Africa, and this is an advertising marketing kind of festival. Branding is everything, and how do we shift the narrative of what it means to be African, the businesses that are grown? Like, tell us, give us more about the richness of Africa and how people are building. The first time I went to Africa is when I went to Senegal and fell in love, to Dakar. It was amazing. And I felt like this is home for me, like this is home. But, we definitely, when people think about Africa, they think about South Africa, different from, I think, sort of the mainland. We think of, Egypt, we think of other countries, but give us the breadth of how should people really be looking at the continent? How should people consider, doing business, in Africa? What are the opportunities there that some folks might be missing out on?
I feel like everything here is an opportunity. Like I know chefs who returned from the States who are now in Ghana who have just these amazing restaurants. I feel like everything. I mean, I know people who started dry cleaning companies here and are very successful at it. But if you take every single business you can think of, maybe in the States it's very saturated, but when you come here, there's just this open market for it. And that's something I find as an entrepreneur, that's something I find very fun and inspiring.
Yeah,
the continent there's every time. So I live in Atlanta, right? My mom and my dad are back home in Nigeria, and every time I come back to the continent, if it's in Nigeria or if it's Rwanda or if it's Mauritius, right? There's you just can see it. It's almost like you're looking around and you're almost like a kid in a candy shop.
Yeah.
Right? Actually, at some point you have to settle down and say to yourself, okay, just relax, right? Because you see it. You see all the opportunities.
Yes.
And even with my MBAs, so my MBAs are all middle to senior managers at their companies. So when we're talking and they're doing projects, you can see that they are starting to pinpoint really those gaps on the continent. So Africa is to me, if you're a business right now, especially if you are an African-American business owner, you need to be looking. Africa has to be your hotspot. When you say growth, so we talk about, you find your market, but then when we start talking about growth,
yes,
and you start talking about markets, if Africa is not on your list, And I don't care if you're doing fintech, if you're doing fashion, if you're doing movies.
And that was my next question.
Okay.
What are the industries? What should
it's $1 billion. We have 1 billion people, so that alone should be incentive. That alone is a market.
Is there anything?
It's just amazing.
Like, what's the entry point? What's our entry point to get?
Well, so listen, the entry point. So here's the thing I love about being an African living in the States that goes back. There's so many conduits. So for instance, Ghana, if you're looking at doing a TV show, if you're doing production, if you're doing Nicole, right? I know exactly. I'm going to Ghana. I'm sitting with Nicole and we're brainstorming, right? And because she knows the environment, right? And if it's Nigeria is featuring very strongly on Netflix right now because, and our sister Bolanle Austin Peters, right? She did the movie. I can't remember the, where the 1% of the 1%. Every time I see her, we keep doing that. That's the tagline of her movie, right? So we have people who are doing these things that you don't have to come in here and be kind of wide-eyed looking for answers. There are people who are doing these things who can help you, establish you, right? And it's not okay. So we talk about movies. We talk about let me say motion pictures, TV, and movies. Then you talk about the financial sector, everything. Fred, her cousin, education. Africa is literally changing education as we speak, right? The Ghanaians, for some reason, seem to be on top of this. I don't know what it is. What's going on, Nicole?
I mean, if you dream it, do it. I mean, I have a friend who got into the cocoa business. And why did she get into the cocoa business? Because in Ghana, most of our cocoa is exported and no value added. And then we buy chocolate from Europe. So she came back here and was like, no, I'm going to make the chocolate here. And now she makes just a beautiful, tasty chocolate. And again, because she's one of the first to do that, she's only a handful of people actually manufacturing chocolate on the ground. That's just a recipe for success. But it's everything. If you think it, basketball. Yeah. I mean, if you come here and just started, and people are doing it. But if you just have a training camp for young people to play basketball and just see where that goes, where that can lead them. But it's everything. You think it, there's an opportunity here in Ghana and the rest of the continent for it.
There's an opportunity here. And yes, I'm going to call out some countries that I feel are doing it right. And I don't do this to discriminate against any others, but you have Ghana, you have Rwanda. So I put those two on when you go west and east coast. Yeah. Those two countries, they're smaller countries, but they're environments that I felt have been very conducive to new businesses, right? Because they've set things up in such a way that you could come in and at least get yourself started. Then you have the beasts, Nigeria and then Kenya, those two, east-west, right? They're very mature markets, the biggest economies, and they have very strong technology, very strong digital, very strong media industries. Yeah. That should be of interest. Of course, you got to talk about South Africa, right? South Africa has just a very mature economy. I will say that sometimes the mistake a lot of people do is they just go straight to South Africa. Yeah. And I've always said that if you truly want to just like hit the real Africa in terms of the challenges that most of people need resolved, you might want to come to some of these other places that are not as mature as South Africa, so that you can truly solve some problems and not be restricted to that particular market, because they're a little bit more advanced than many other of the economies. So there's a lot of opportunities.
It's everything. At one point, it was hair. I mean, I remember when I first returned to Ghana to live. It must have been in 2006. I had my natural hair.
Yes. And
none of the salons knew how to do my hair on the continent.
Wow.
And that's because they were really just trained in relaxing perms, weaves.
In
Africa, in Ghana, at least in Accra. I'll even say in Accra, Ghana. That was my experience. But now I know so many young female entrepreneurs who have just come back, and this is all a lot of shea butter products from a variety of young female entrepreneurs. But just again, you think it, you dream it, you can come here and do it.
Okay, so let's just get real about the situation, because some Black Americans go back to Africa. Is it really that easy? We know there's a branding.
I'm not saying it's easy.
Come on, come to Africa. And we get there and we're like, this is not what they said that they were going to do. Because we have a perception of, and of course it's because of media, and that we need to shift the dynamics of what the continent is about, what relationships are like, what the people are like. We barely know here in America, our African heritage, our African history. God forbid go and try to start a business and, we're lost based off the relations. And I think we have to have a clear understanding about, how Africans, even view African Americans and what the nature of that relationship is.
Yeah.
Is it one that binds us so that we are both welcoming on each side? We do know. Go ahead.
I've got two things to say to that. First of all, no, it's not going to be easy, but what dreams are easy?
Sure.
Like, aren't dreams supposed to be something you fight for? Isn't that what makes it worth it? Absolutely. So no, it's not going to be easy. But number two, I keep hearing that whole thing about kind of that rift between African Americans and Africans, or the perception we have of each other. And I actually want to call it a lie. And the reason I'll say that is it's not the majority. It's, yes, you have a small fraction of people who have those stereotypes about each other. But I think on a whole, I think there's something else there.
And what is that something else? What do you believe?
I think there's a lot of love and mutual respect. The fact that I can drive down Accra and see Will Smith's face, painted on a barbershop, and see Obama's face on a T-shirt. I mean, it's just, I feel like there is a lot of love and respect there. Yes, there's the stereotypes we might have of each other, but I feel like it's a small segment of us, and I really feel like we should try to put out there more about what the majority, how the majority feel about one another.
Right. Chidi, what would you say?
I agree completely. I agree completely with Nicole on this. Mm-hmm. And I actually think that even the small minority of folks who have their stereotypes, I've always countered that by saying, look, that's asinine. It doesn't make any sense for you to believe in that kind of mythology, when the truth of the matter is we're all here kind of fighting the same battle. And ultimately, the opportunities that we have to advance each other are so intense, right? Mm-hmm. And I say intense because it's such an uplifting experience. I know a brother that I went to undergrad with, and he, New Jersey boy, never left the country, got a job in Kenya in 1996, and he hasn't come back. Mm-hmm. Right? He hasn't come back. In fact, he looks at me like I'm the foreigner because he is completely immersed on the continent. It is not easy. Mm-hmm. Look, doing business in Africa, as an MBA professor, I will tell you, doing business in Africa is rough. It is tough. But same thing with New York City. I know New York City is a tough place to do business. I've spent a great amount of my teenage years and young adulthood in New York. It's a tough city to be in. So just because it's tough doesn't mean that it's not doable. There are people doing things. They go there. Once you kind of hunker down, get your bearings together, do your 360 periscope thing, understand the environment, then slowly you start to really get some things done. And if you have that stick-to-itiveness that I know we our people here have, come on now, you will do very well. So it's, yes, we don't want to say it's easy, but it's not a cakewalk. You do have some advantages, to be quite honest, if you're coming in from the States to Africa to do business, because the truth of the matter is that your lenses are a little different. So it allows you to see things a little bit more, from a broader viewpoint, and then you can attack some opportunities. And of course, you got to make sure you're aligned with some folks on the ground. Yeah. Don't just come in, stay in a hotel, and try to do it all by yourself.
Right. Partnerships is fun. That's a part of the conversation today too. Is our theme is building partnerships, pathways to partnerships. Mm-hmm. And what do you think is sort of the best way, I guess, and that could be within any business, of finding a path to building partnerships between, African Americans and Africans, or anywhere. I mean, we would like to know, and I think sort of the big gap or missed opportunity is that people have not been paying attention. And it's like the new frontier that's not so new, but there's so much richness in the continent and so many opportunities, even with our Rouse sister Sharia introducing people to the continent through Tastemakers Africa, so there are opportunities there. But what else? I mean, what was the inspiration for you, Nicole, when you started your TV series or your net series that became super popular?
Yeah, well, there were many reasons why I started an African City. Mainly was to fight the single story of Africa. I wanted something else out there. But yeah, I wanted to encourage people to come back home. I wanted to encourage I was Ghanaian, born in Ghana, raised in America, and now I'm back home. So I wanted to encourage other Africans to come home, and I wanted to encourage Black Americans to come home. So that was one of the reasons I started the show. But, sometimes I realized that some aspects I started for the wrong reason, so I realized that sometimes I started the show, maybe it was for the white gaze, so I wanted them to see Africa differently, Wow. Now that is kicked off the list, it's really what makes me happy is when Ghanaian women in supermarkets see me and just say, thank you. Yes. Thank you for creating a show where I can see myself. Thank you for creating a show where I can see other women like me. So that's one of the reasons I did the show. But then in terms of encouraging people to come back, there are people who came back because they watched An African City. There's literally a family here in Accra that saw season 1 of An African City. And the woman was like, hubby, we're packing our 2 kids and we're going to Ghana. That's what we're going to make home. Wow. And there's a few other people who've written me and said the same thing, that they returned because the show inspired them to finally take that leap of faith. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to flip it a little bit. So
flip it for us.
So when you talk about business opportunities, entrepreneurial opportunities, listen, in general, entrepreneurship is not for everyone. Right? It's a tough world to be in. And even Zane and I, we actually are going to tell our story because, you see the two of us, you saw us in Marrakesh at Marianne's place. You might think that, man, the two of us have been through a lot, right? And so we've seen entrepreneurship on the continent, and it's rough.
Yes. One
of the things that I will say, and this is going to be a tad controversial, is
bring it.
I have seen many of the top companies in Africa. When you say who's the chief product officer, who's the head of marketing, and you see a lot of young white people from Europe and from the United States who have these jobs. Yeah. And what they've done is they put themselves in a position where they're just like, I see an opportunity. I want to make an impact. Yeah. And the continent and the continent of Africa is where I'm going to go do it. And they go there and they get these gigs and they're impacting Africa as we speak. Wow. Many of them are the ones that will end up getting investment, right? Yeah. To build companies that are focused solely on Africa. Like they're not focused anywhere else but on Africa. And so my disappointment has been that I'm not seeing enough of African Americans in these positions, right? I just don't see enough of them. And every company, I work with companies on the continent, and I'll see it. They'll say, okay, here's our CEO, and it's an Asian American woman, and then the CPO is a white European. And there's nothing wrong with that, because these folks, I love them because they're doing the work. They're doing the work, and they are missionaries, not mercenaries. They're not here coming just to make money. They are missionaries. They are believing in what they're doing. However, I just wish I could see more. And I've said it. I've said, if we could get more folks to come in and take these gigs, they will definitely benefit 100%.
Chidi, it's not just in the private sector, it's in the public sector too.
That's right.
A year after I graduated from college, I wanted to come back home. So I worked with the government of Ghana. I worked for the Ministry for Private Sector Development. And again, there were these European organizations that were placing their citizens in the public sector in Ghana. And it made me think, wait, hold on. What about, first of all, why aren't Blacks here being placed in some of those positions.
Right.
And then, if anything, why aren't African Americans being invited to those positions? But yeah, it's also a concern of mine in the public sector.
So is there like a movement there? Like, of course, in the US, there's been a fight as it relates to advertising and marketing and getting more people of color into these positions, into these corporate positions, especially as it relates to shaping the minds in terms of images that we see, the products that we buy. We had to fight here for that. It's been like a 50-year journey. But is there a movement like that in Africa where, there's a study? Is there like an EEOC filing equivalent, in Africa? To
I don't know too much about it. I keep hearing more and more about Birthright Africa. Mm-hmm. I don't know too much about it, but I've been hearing a lot more about it. And what I do like is they're offering Twi classes, Ghanaian dialect. They're offering online Twi classes. So I see that there are a lot of African Americans taking those online Twi classes. But yeah, there is something called Birthright Africa, but unfortunately, I don't know too much about it. Maybe Chidi does. But.
No, I don't. But in terms of a movement,
what do you think? Is there a movement or something that's happening that sort of combats that theory of you have white people coming in from other countries that are in these corporate positions that Black people should be in, and how are they able to stay in business there without someone just going up, I don't want to encourage rioting, but there's a protest, there's a method that people, you have to fight for the
that's a tough one, because as I said, many of these companies do know. And so let me be clear too. I mean, a majority of the leadership on the continent is continental. So these are continental Africans, because these are smart people. They're very talented. So they are heading the agencies, they are heading the media companies. So let's not make that mistake. When I mention white folks being in jobs, it's really, now when you talk about the senior leadership team of an organization, even if it's led maybe by an African, in many cases you will see maybe 30%, 40% of the senior leadership team being white or non-African or non-African American. So let me make sure that point is clear. There's no movement per se, right? There's no movement per se. And that's because, again, I'm just going to be very clear about this. These folks care. These folks see themselves as Africans. In fact, in many cases, they're just doing the job and doing it for the right reasons. And so the opportunities are there when jobs are posted or when they're looking for people. The opportunities are there. I just don't know if there is enough of an awareness, right, on the recruiting side, but also on the talent side, that these opportunities are there, both for, well, if you're talking about African Americans here, that awareness, I'm not sure is there. But on the continent, if you're qualified, I'm telling you, folks are speaking up for themselves. This is my country, right? So, they get those jobs as needed.
So I just looked up Birthright Africa. Birthright Africa inspires youth and young adults of African descent ages 13 to 30 to explore their cultural roots and legacy of innovation within the United States, and selects nations in Africa as a birthright. And through travel and project-based learning and collaboration with our partners, we aim to enhance confidence and spark. Anyway, it's a long mission statement, but basically it looks like they're really trying to encourage young people on to travel to Africa, to travel to different countries in Africa. I did see that I think there's a billionaire out there who's trying to make sure that recent graduates from HBCUs get a free trip to the continent. So there are movements out there. We just have to Google them and find them, I guess.
Yeah, even one of the questions in the chat from Sandra Lawrence. Hey, Sandra. She asked, how can we educate our youth in high school to even know the possibility of looking to Africa as a place to work in after college? Either one.
Yeah, that is, I mean, there has to be a concerted effort. So President Obama, had the Young African Leadership Institute, YALI, right?
I mean,
so he had that. And so he's done a significant amount of work. And even with the Obama Foundation, he's doing work there too. And so I think there's just ways to encourage some of I think it's Robert Smith, who's a billionaire, who is so he and other folks like himself could actually take up the mantle of making sure that we make those connections. And look, for instance, Rouse. The reason that we put Rouse together is relatively similar, even though all of us are quite mature in our projects and in our careers, but same kind of deal is to get all of us in the room so that we actually form those relationships and that intimate relationship where we feel comfortable just talking to each other without even seeing the bridge. There's no bridge now, right? And then even myself and Zane, one of our programs was Amplify. It was Amplify Accelerator. It's a talent accelerator for content creators. And we did it in Rwanda, Ghana, Nigeria, and Kenya. And the reason we did that was for young people in Africa to feel comfortable creating their own stories and telling their own stories. Nicole was actually one of our mentors. She didn't know she was a mentor. She was just one of them, right? That we pointed to as somebody that they should check out. And then we are looking to do amplifies in the States where you, as an African-American young talent or creator, your lenses are focused on Africa, right? And then once you start to do those kinds of things, I think there's more opportunities. Here in Atlanta, I'm looking to see how Atlanta becomes essentially the landing zone for Africans and the takeoff zone for African Americans to go to Africa. So Atlanta as a bridge, right? I think it was Magic Mike, not Magic Mike. What I said, Magic Mike, not Magic Mike. Oh my God! What's the name? The rapper? I can't remember. There's something Mike. I'm drawing a blank. He called Atlanta, there you are. The Wakanda of the United States. And I agree that those are the kinds of connections we have to be doing. It's not only on a business level, but also almost at a municipal level, right? Where we make those connections and make sure that people can see that those relationships are being made.
And I'll say at this point in 2020, there is no excuse. The power of the internet. I mean, with an African city, I was lucky that YouTube existed. Yeah. But now in terms of connecting, to learn more about the continent and to learn more about how you can be part of what's going on in the continent, there's Twitter, there's Instagram, there's TikTok, there's too much information out there. It's just too easy now to connect with one another. Yeah. So use those platforms.
Erica Riggs said it's Killer Mike, Chidi, not Magic.
Yes, it's not Magic Mike. I mean, geez, what's wrong with me?
Killer Mike is amazing.
Killer Mike.
Actually, Killer Mike, I watched his last documentary, Sitting Here in Accra, where he talks about the power or the lack of the power of the black dollar. How I think the black dollar just stays within the community for 4 hours. But if you look at other communities, the dollar stays for several weeks. Yeah. But I realized even in Accra that's also an issue. Where do I buy my groceries from? Everything. I just realized, anyway, Killer Mike is an inspiration for me. Even as I sit here in Accra, there's a lot of things that can be applied.
You brought up an interesting point about the dollar and how long it stays circulated within, now you're enlightening me. Even in some African communities, it doesn't stay long, and if in the African American communities, it only lasts for 4 hours. What is in the last chat that we had with Isaiah Thomas, we talked about systemic issues, systemic racism or systemic. It's something happening in our community that makes us push that dollar back out.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts about that, or how can we keep the money circulating back in?
Well, I know that for me, even before I watched the Killer Mike documentary, I knew that I wanted my TV show. People won't buy because they don't know about something, right? Sure. So with an African city, I just made sure all the women were decked out in designs by African fashion designers, right? And so people started asking, "Oh, what's that skirt? It's from Christy Brown. Oh, that's from Afro Mark Trends. Oh, that's from Mina Evans." So people started researching more about African designers and then putting their dollars towards those African designers or their CDs towards those African designers. Same with music. When you watch the show, every song is by an African musician, right? And then so people are taking those songs and going to iTunes and going to other music services and buying music from those artists. So in terms of making sure we're spending the Black dollar or the African dollar, well, people need to know about those Black companies. People need to know about those African companies. So I feel like my job as a TV producer is to make sure a global audience knows about those companies.
So it's back to the branding, pushing brand. I think we have to be very intentional now about that, even intentional about some of the partnerships that we're building. I love to hear that you made sure that the women wore African designers, the soundtrack was by African musicians. So just little steps like that, I think are really important.
Yeah.
Let me say a couple of things. First, I wanted to hark back to our brother Olowonjo Chala, who is the CEO of Alafia, right? And the reason I love what he's doing is that when you speak about the Black dollar, right? It's literally that
Alafia a little bit. I don't think people know.
Yeah, so Alafia is a personal care and beauty line that, or should I say, personal care products line out of Seattle, and Olowonjo is from Togo, and essentially pretty much every single natural resource that he's using for his products is coming from West Africa. So essentially all his suppliers are these women in West Africa who are sourcing all the shea, all the moringa, everything that they use for their products. He is sourcing it from there. He says, he doesn't say, he is the largest employer in Togo, right? Even though he's based in Seattle. And so that is one of the best examples of seeing how that dollar is staying in. It's like, he gets money, and he's a top line in Whole Foods, right? So that's good for him.
Can I get it in New York City? We probably,
if you're in Whole Foods,
Whole
Foods. So if you go to Whole Foods or if you go to Sprouts, the guy is Alafia is the dominant brand there, so you can get his products there.
Yeah.
So people buy from Whole Foods, and they're priced, they're not cheap, right? Which is fine. I'm actually very comfortable with that because the women back home are getting a piece of that, and he's making sure they're getting it. It's not just them getting money as suppliers. He's making sure that their children are getting educated. He's making sure that they're getting educated as financial entrepreneurs, on the finances of being an entrepreneur. And so that's how that dollar circulates. And there are other people who are doing things like that. And so I give that as an example of, you can be here. You can actually, your business could be based in the States, and you could be making significant impact back home. The hair products. There are a couple of hair product companies here in Atlanta. They asked me for counsel on strategy, and I didn't even say a word. I just wrote Africa on the screen and walked out the room. Right? And the reason I could say this is because, listen, you need to understand that if you think hair is big in Atlanta, you need to go to Africa. You need to go to Nigeria. If you go to Lagos, Nigeria, you should go to Accra. If you go to Nairobi, you go to Joburg, forget it, right? I mean, you want hair, every single capital city, every single big city in Africa, hair is a big deal. You have no business not being in business in those cities.
Wow.
So that's the first piece that I wanted to mention. The second piece is, I want to kind of talk about the portrayal of Africa. So think about dance, right? In the last 5 years with social media, the most dominant dance memes or dance anything is African, right? I don't care who wants to argue with me on this. The fact is, you can tell that these young people with access to TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, what they've done is they've really brought this beauty, this raw beauty of how Africans move, how Africans entertain, the talent. They brought it to the screen, and you can tell the impact. I'm seeing more people do. In fact, there's a young woman in Brazil. She's like a white Brazilian, and right now on Instagram, she's one of the top African dancers. Never been to Africa.
Wow.
Right? Never. But she moves and she takes all her inspiration from African dance. And I use it as an example to say of how we are exporting our soft power, right? And we're exporting it, and we should exploit that. And I would like to see, more more activity around those kind of organic ways of African culture being integrated into the Western side of things.
So I think that's interesting, because we talk about sort of the co-opting of our culture. And I think our culture has been co-opted in African culture. You know, we know Black culture, I think it's all linked to African culture, that people seem to export, but they value, but it's not valued enough in the way that it translates monetarily all the time. Like, we don't get the shine that I think we should be getting as it relates to works, products, things that come out of the continent. And I keep circling it back to the branding part of it, and how can we make that better? Someone put in the chat, and it's I guess it goes back to the value in African, but she specifically asked about skin lightening products, and how and I know I was in a meeting the other day, I heard that Johnson & Johnson actually just banned some of their skin lightening products in certain parts of Africa. But the question, I guess, again, about branding from a US perspective about Africans, perhaps African women, is they're not comfortable with the dark skin, so they start to lighten it. What are you guys hearing about that? You sigh, Nicole.
Let me let Nicole start, and then I have some thoughts.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's a global issue. It's a global problem. But maybe I don't focus on the problem. I focus on the solution. So again, one of the reasons I created an African city. If you look at the 5 lead characters, the 5 female lead characters, they're an array of complexions. From light skin to dark skin and everything in between. And for me, I just wanted to make sure that our people were reminded that that's what's beautiful. All of them have natural hair, because again, I just felt like a lot of times beauty, even on the continent of Africa, it had to be European fine hair. So I just created a show to combat that. And I created a show in which Nania has this line in which she's going to a very fancy event and she has her natural hair out and she says, I want people to know that my natural hair is synonymous with glamorous, because everyone around her was like, why don't you do a weave? Why don't you do this? No, she was wearing her natural hair proudly. So I guess where I'm coming from, I don't focus on the problem, because the problem has such a long history. We know where it comes from, right? I can't even blame anybody who bleaches, because we know where that comes from. We know the history behind that. So for me, what I'm just trying to do is be proactive and be part of the solution.
To your point, and you brought it up a little bit earlier about seeing images of yourself. And when you don't have images of yourself that you have regular access to, and images in sort of like the media, the grand place of what success and beauty actually look like, then that creates that systemic issue of self-hate. Concept of beauty.
Yes. But something I learned through the show is I will not judge anyone, because I was thinking if for all of your life, if anytime you turned on a TV show or a movie and you saw that the love interest is always a light-skinned woman or a white woman and never a dark-skinned woman, what are you going to start thinking about yourself? So again, that's why I just said with all my work, whether it's a TV show or a film, I mean, my film Before the Vows, we casted Mamia J, and she's just the epitome of what beauty is, right? And again, I just thought it was important to make sure that women saw a dark-skinned woman being the object of somebody's love.
Yeah, mommy, please. Yeah. Mommy, that's all I have to say. That's my sister. That's my sister right there. And you talk about beauty. Listen, so I have 3 daughters. We just watched Skin by Beverly Naya on Netflix. So if you haven't seen it, it's a very interesting show. And they talk about bleaching in Africa. And so the reason I wanted to watch it with my daughters was to make sure that they understood that, look, you're going to, this is good. I almost feel like they've been sheltered in a way. And I say sheltered because they've just been around people who have never really, that has never been an issue. My mom is light skinned. My two younger sisters are light skinned. There's one that's not as light skinned as them, but that has never been a conversation. Never, ever, right? And so for me, when we have this discussion, I'm with Nicole. I'm not focused on the problem. I'm just focused on making sure that you understand that there's different shades and different sizes, right? That's just what the world is all about. So when you get into a place where you start to think of yourself in one way or the other due to the shade of your color, then that's a problem. And then my youngest daughter actually was very uncomfortable with it. And she got uncomfortable to the extent that she started crying. And when she started crying, myself and my wife, we had to kind of stop the show and ask her why. And my realization was that she probably was the one that saw that pressure more so than her twin sisters, because of school, her friends, because of, she's more out there. She's
How old
11.
Is she?
She's 11.
How old is she?
And so what we did, with her, we just said, listen, look around you, right? And we started, we talked about Lupita. We talked about, you go from Lupita to Candy Newton, and you just kind of bring everybody in. I said, all kinds of flavors. I said, look at your own family. And so for me it's all about making sure that all of them continue to see, like Nicole was doing, for instance, Mame. When she says Mame, that's another one of our Rouse sisters.
Yes.
I mean, come on, right? Adama Paris.
Come
on, Wakaya Diallo.
Yeah, the designers. Adama is a fashion designer. Mame produces like amazing play, like give the people what we're just, secret coding each other. Share with, some of the resources that we have and know about. Like, when you name drop is what I'm saying. When you name drop, give context.
Okay, sorry about that. I mean, Nicole and Mommy are tied to the hip because Mommy is one of our actresses, but she's more than that. She's a producer. She's a creative. She's just one of the most brilliant creatives that I've ever been around. Okay. And then you talk about Adama, she's a fashion, and I'm not trying to focus on dark-skinned sisters. I just want to make sure that folks understand that these are women who are not interested in that BS, right? And even our light-skinned sisters are not interested in that BS. That's what I loved about Rouse. We were all there together. And for me as a man, so let me just say this, for me as a man, being at Rouse, as I've said to Zayn, I don't think I've said this to Aisha because I feel Aisha will knock my head off my body. I said, it was one of the most visceral experiences I've ever had because I felt like I was almost a bystander observing women, African women, African American women, European African women, all in one place, different shades, different colors, different sizes, and it was kick-ass, right? And so I wish my daughters could have seen that, and they've seen some of it on the videos and the pictures, but I wish they could be in the midst of it to see how Africa and African America, how that stuff works, and all this superficial nonsense is just BS, right? There's no reason why that should be something that becomes such a huge issue of contention for our communities. So.
Yeah. But on the superficial, there's something actually important about the superficial nonsense. Let me tell you why. So I just realized that when I was a teenager growing up in New York, I had this, and I don't know where I got it. I got it from media. I got it from watching even some women in my own family. But I started getting into brands. I started thinking about Gucci and Louis Vuitton and you name it. But all those brands were European. So why is this 13-year-old Ghanaian girl in New York City, how is she getting European brands on her radar? Why are European brands?
Nicole, it's all the branding, so right? Again, it's all about how they position themselves. Because look, in New York, coming up as a young, in the 90s, as a young hip hop NYU student, Timberlands, right? I thought Timberland was a black company until we found out that they didn't even want us wearing that stuff. So I hear you.
Oh, I learned something new. But with my show, exactly, I wanted to reverse that. So instead of young girls or young women looking to aspire to some of these European brands, I wanted them to aspire to African brands. So Christy Brown or Afro Martrends or Mina Evans or Arshell's Bombshell brand. I wanted to start fighting that.
Yeah.
But yes, it goes back to branding.
It all goes back to branding, Adrienne. It comes right full circle.
Yeah, it's loving ourselves.
I agree. And then once we're comfortable and, we embrace the brand of Africa, of the partnership of us and the continent, then we, again, have to be very intentional, and putting efforts in terms of visualizations of what we look like, tell the stories of, how we're doing it. This conference has become, one of, most of the faces in the conference look like ours. And that was because when I went to Cannes, a lot of the faces I saw did not look like ours. So again, it's reinforcing that we have a space and a place of advertising, marketing, and branding. And let's bring it full circle with various people into the conversation. I cut you off.
Let me throw a question. Can I throw a question to the two of you? I want to ask you about Black Panther.
We have 4 minutes left.
That's right. So let's close on this, right? This is a good one. Black Panther. Let me ask you about what that meant from a branding standpoint. And if you notice, I didn't say for Africa. I didn't say for African Americans. I just said from a branding standpoint. What?
I'm drinking my tea.
You go first, Nicole. You go first.
Exactly. What does that mean? What did it have an impact?
I didn't say nothing. I'm just drinking my tea. I'm sitting here drinking my tea.
You take it. Come on.
So okay, ask the question one more time. Let me hear you again. Tell me again.
The question is Black Panther. Just what did you think was the impact from a branding standpoint? For not just for Africa, but also for African Americans. It was a flashpoint, and I use the word flashpoint, right? I don't even use it as a turning point. I use it as a flashpoint.
Yes.
And I'm asking you, what did you think about that as a branding campaign?
So I thought it was a very powerful, the first word I'll say is powerful because uniting because we had families going as a collective together. I know my entire family went together. It was we had like 20 tickets to go, and we had gathered for a funeral, unfortunately, but we made it like our moment of joy to go see Black Panther. I think that it represented sort of hope and empowerment to have a superhero represented that looked like us, and the movie was about us. It just showed kind of, again, power keeps circulating back into my mind about, positions of power, the education, like the opportunity, the hope, the possibilities, purpose. Like there are all of these things that stuck out to me about what that meant. And it showed that, you can, it was all about you can. It was, I don't know. I could ramble words on and on, but those are my initial thoughts. Nicole, you go.
For me, I'm just happy that there were people who had that feeling like what you're describing, Adrienne, and that's all I'll say, and I'll continue.
Because I know is there a disconnect between Africa and African Americans and how we viewed it? What's the problem? What is it? Because I've been hearing.
And I'm sure. Yeah, Nicole, I would say if you had something to say, drop it on us. This is family here. Yeah. I asked the question. Go ahead.
Well, true partnership. There's something beautiful about being very specific, right? So, so some of the clothing, okay, fine, the designers being praised and everything, but some of the clothing, as a Ghanaian, I'm looking at it, and I'm seeing everything mixed match, right? Like I'm seeing some parts from some tribes in Kenya, and some other tribes in Nigeria, and some tribes in Ghana, and they're all mismatched. And for me, like, that's not authentic. There's something that actually makes me sad about that.
And we had no clue. Let it be. We were just proud from an African American standpoint, from a Black person in America, to see with the naked eye. I could not tell you any of that. I just knew it looked authentic African, and obviously I was wrong.
So again, it becomes about Africa being a country. Versus continent,
right? Country.
Country.
That's the end.
Yeah. So I want the collaboration to just be more authentic.
I think this is a good way for us to close, right? Because when we think about what Black Panther did, I was so proud of that movie. Ryan Coogler and all those guys just coming in, and the women in the movie were just killers, right? I mean, they just blew me away, right? And so, but there was a challenge there, because even when Ryan went to Africa, he went to South Africa first, right? And I thought that he missed an opportunity there, because for instance, if he was to go, let's say, to Uganda or Tanzania or Zambia, there was some things that he would see. So from a branding standpoint, the reason I asked the question is, when we're doing these things, and look, Beyonce caught some flack for this, and I know Beyonce is untouchable. I'm not saying she deserved the flack or she didn't. I am not saying anything about Beyonce. All I'm saying is,
we are saying that's
what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. She caught flack, and that was part of the conversation. Was okay. So let's watch it and see. I trust what the sister is trying to do. I actually do, right? I trust her implicitly because I know the guys who work with her. But let's see how that plays out. Yeah. So I think I wanted to bring that out to say that's almost kind of a encapsulation of the entire conversation we're having. Is there significant opportunities? Africa as a continent, 54 countries or 57, depending on how you want to argue it, is just an amalgam of cultures, of experiences, it's just a beautiful continent to be. Those of us in Africa, we haven't even visited all of Africa. In fact, we have a problem intra-Africa where we barely know each other, right? So that's how big
travel from country to country in Africa. That's an issue too, I hear.
Yeah, and that's what Sheree is also. Not only is she doing the inter, she's doing the intra, right? Yeah. And so I would say that we have some opportunities. I think that there's some really good, like Nicole. I look up to Nicole because when my wife was watching the African City, I just remember being uncomfortable. Like, man, I hope this lady doesn't start having all kinds of crazy ideas. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of close on that.
So I'm getting signals from the backstage like, you gotta shut it down. We gotta go. We have a 12:30 session coming up. This has been a really good conversation. Thank you guys so much for being today. I think the conversation was rich. I value it, and we hopefully will have a larger representation at the Can Diversity Collective's Inkwell Beach Live in Inkwell. So thank you. If anybody's watching, please stay tuned for our next session, which starts promptly at 12:30. If there are any technical difficulties, maybe not. We did talk about Mercury being in retrograde, so things happen. But Nicole and Chidi, thank you very much. This is Thursday, our 4th day of the Can Diversity Collective, and we will see you in the next session. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.